All right. So when we last, I'm pretty sure that the last thing we did was the Second Boer War. Is
Yeah,
that
you were
right?
going over you were going over concentration camps.
Yeah, we were talking about like the way that the war ended and stuff, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the war comes to an end in 1902. What letter was that? Was that K? Yash, you're not giving me a lot of confidence. Yash is like, I don't know how to count. Where are we?
Hmm. I don't think you had us put a letter for that one.
You're killing me. You're killing me.
I think that one would have been J.
All
J.
right. Let's make that one J. Make the Second Boer War J, which makes this one K. All right. So we're gonna go. K is we're gonna call K. We did the mineral revolution before the war, right? Okay. So we're gonna call K the Union of South Africa. All right. So big number K, the Union of South Africa. All right. When the Second Boer War comes to an end in 1902, the four states of South Africa are all unified under the British, right? The British control everything. Everything is going to become English speaking, right? The Dutch are no longer in control. The Dutch are still quite unhappy with this, right? So the Dutch are going to be resisting this, and they're going to resist this, and they're going to resist this, and they're going to start going through like legal actions. Okay, so they start basically suing their way to independence, essentially. So over the course of 1908 to 1909, they have a national convention. The result of that national convention is going to be home rule. They're going to get a version of home rule, and that's a capital word, capital home, capital rule. I guess a phrase, home rule. Home rule is a status that they're going to get of basically limited autonomy, right? So they're going to get a degree of autonomy. This is where you're going to find this as we start studying through like the British Empire and the British Empire kind of like collapsing and like falling apart. South Africa is one of the first parts of that empire to start falling apart. Home rule is where you get to control your domestic affairs. You're controlling all your domestic affairs, and but you have limited control over foreign affairs. You control all your domestic affairs, but you have limited control over the foreign affairs. So South Africa is basically independent at this point. They're like kind of 80% independent, let's say. Because like when World War I breaks out, South Africa is going to get forced to join in World War I as well. So the country is now called the Union of South Africa. That's the name of the country. And it is created as a unitary state. It's created as a unitary state. A unitary state, do one of you guys remember what a unitary state is, like from your AP geography or AP government classes? You guys remember like the difference between a unitary and a federal state?
So a unitary state essentially doesn't have like literal provinces and stuff like that, while a federal state does.
Yeah,
So
basically.
something like that.
Right. Is the United States a unitary or a federal state?
It's federal state.
Right. We're a federal state because the 50 states within the United States, the 50 states have quite a bit of autonomy, right? They have a lot of like local control over what's going on, right? Like Utah is like 49% independent, right? 51% part of the United States and 49% independent in a way, right? And all 50 states have quite a bit of freedom as to what they can do. So South Africa does not go with a federal model, they go with a unitary model. This should seem a little bit weird to you, right? How unified are the four states of South Africa up until this point? Like, not at all, right? Not unified at all, right? The Brits and the Dutch hate each other. They literally just fought a war, like one of the nastiest wars in world history up until this point, right? They literally just fought a war about this, but they choose to do a unitary state. that basically dissolves the state governments of the 4 states, right? What are the name, Ilha, what's the name of the 2 Dutch states?
The Orange and Transvaal.
Orange and Transvaal, good. And Kira, what's the name of the 2 British states? The 2 English states?
Yeah, I look.
Oh, Kira doesn't know. Wentao, help her out.
Oh,
Cape and Natal.
Cape and Natal. There we go. All right, so that's good. So those 4 states are basically they're trying to force them to become one government, essentially, instead of 4. They can't even agree on where to put the capital. Oops. They can't agree on where to put the capital, and so they share capitals. South Africa actually has 3 capitals. The executive branch goes into Pretoria. So the executive branch goes into Pretoria. The legislative branch goes into Johannesburg. And the judiciary goes into Bloemfontein. Into Bloemfontein, right? Natal doesn't get a capital, and so the other 3 states just pay Natal. Oh, I lied to you. I'm sorry. The legislative branch isn't in Johannesburg. The legislative branch is in Cape Town. I'm sorry. I lied to you. Oh, I lied to 7th period too.
And
Oh, well.
Mr. Veenstra, could you say the capitals again?
Sure. Yeah, sorry. And this time I won't lie to you. All right. So the executive branch goes into Pretoria, okay, which is in Transvaal. The legislative branch goes into Cape Town, which is in Cape. The judicial branch goes into Bloemfontein, which is in Orange. And then Natal doesn't get a capital, so the other 3 states just pay them money. Okay. South Africa still has those capitals today, actually. Right? It still has 3 capitals today. It's one of only 2 countries in the world to have multiple capitals. You guys know the other one? Bolivia. Bolivia has 2 capitals. Yeah. There you go. The Canary Islands also have 2 capitals, where every odd year it's on this island and every even year it's on this island. They have 2 capitals, and they, depending on the number of the year, they govern from island A or island B. Pretty bonkers, huh? Hey, whatever. You got to unify your country somehow. All right. The number 1 priority of this new country is white unity. They have to get the white people to unify together. Otherwise, this country is going to fall apart. Right? The Dutch and the English don't trust each other. They don't like each other. They just fought a war with each other, and you're trying to unify them. Okay? White unity, of course, is going to come at the expense of the blacks. Right? White unity means that they're going to be unified against the natives, against the African tribes, right? So it's going to be a problem. Okay, Botha and Smuts are going to be our first 2 prime ministers. They're going to be our first 2 prime ministers based out of Pretoria. There. Let's go to our next letter. H. Wait, A, B, C, D, H, I, J, K, L. Is it L? Yeah, Drew, we got a question before we move?
Yeah, South Africa had 2 prime ministers, or is that just order of how they came into office?
In the order of operation. Yeah, first and then
Okay,
second.
all right.
Yeah. First and then second. Okay. What's the next letter? L. Drew says L. All right. I believe Drew. All right. So let's go to voting in the Cape. Okay. We're going back in time slightly. Cape had something called the Cape Qualified Franchise. Cape Qualified Franchise. So under the British, Cape allowed non-racialized voting. So all men who owned property could vote regardless of skin color, regardless of their race. So black, colored, and white, all of them could vote in Cape if they had enough property. Okay, this man right here, Saul Solomon, who is awesome for 2 reasons. First, he's fighting racism. That's pretty cool. Second, look at those mutton chops, baby. Yeah, I know. Manvith knows what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. All right. So those are the kind of mutton chops that only the 19th century can give us. All right. So Saul Solomon is the one who creates this non-racialized voting. And they set the property rate at very, very low, only 20 pounds. British money is called pounds, right? Only at 20 pounds, which would be the equivalent of about 25, 30 bucks American, something like that. Okay. And they set it very, very low. He sets it very low on purpose because he wants all the men to vote. He wants all the men to vote. This is, of course, going to be deeply problematic for the Dutch, deeply problematic for those Afrikaners, right? The Afrikaners are running almost a slave state at this point. And here's Saul Solomon in 1870 giving the vote to everybody, basically. This is a cartoon criticizing him, right? It's criticizing him. These are all caricatures of different leaders of the party as like monkeys, as the lion, right? Here's Solomon. Here's the Xhosa leader who Solomon's like petting like a pet, like an animal, you know? It's this 19th century criticism here. And they're criticizing him as, you know, collecting all of his pets together. As you can expect, we're going to start getting resistance in this, okay? As we start pushing towards unity, we're going to get resistance. First, this man here, Gordon Sprigg. Gordon Sprigg, who, despite the fact that he has a glorious beard, right? This is a glorious beard. Despite that fact, he unfortunately is trying to take away the vote from Africans. So what he does is he excludes tribal tenure for the property qualifications. At this point in time, most of the Xhosa people in Cape are living in reservations, kind of like U.S. Indian reservations. They're kind of function like a U.S. like the American Indian reservations in the United States. And he says that basically any property you have in tribal land doesn't count. He's trying to take the vote away from all of the Black people in the tribal lands. The Xhosa resist this. Xhosa resist this. They call it tung umlonu, which is sew up the mouth, like you're trying to take away their voice by sewing their mouth shut, right? So actually, a lot of the more liberals, more progressives, and the Xhosa leaders, they actually go into Xhosa tribal land and register just tons and tons and tons of men to vote, like way more men that used to be than were there before, because the property rate is still so low, right? If you have like $20 worth of property, as long as it's not tribal property, $20 worth, you're in, you get to vote, right? So if you own like a pair of shoes, you get to vote. If you own like anything, you get to vote, basically, right? It actually results in the number of Black voters increasing, which was not what Sprigg intended. Sprigg was trying to shut it down. Okay, Yash, can you read? The next guy who is trying to dismantle this is Cecil Rhodes. Cecil Rhodes is going to be very, very famous for the British. He's basically going to become like the most famous name in like British African colonialism. At different points, he's going to end up, you know, kind of administrating over like half the continent at different points, basically. Yash, go ahead and read his wonderful quote for us.
My motto is equal rights for every civilized man south of the Zambezi. What is a civilized man? It is a man who has sufficient education to write his name and has some property or works, not a loafer. We will treat the natives as long as they remain in a state of barbarism. The native is to be treated as a child and denied the franchise. We must adopt a system of despotism, such as works in India in our relations with the barbarism of South Africa.
Yeah. So Rhodes is going to be one of the leaders of Cape, one of the leaders of like a governor of Cape. And what he does is he increases the property ownership rate and he says only men with property, but he takes it from 20 pounds all the way up to like 1,000 pounds, right? And again, it can't be tribal. So now he's basically meaning that you have to own land. You can't just have 20 bucks. You have to own land, basically, is what he's saying. This is going to start really severely limiting Xhosa voting. And this is going to be a real problem. He's going to end up leaving. He's going to end up taking over Zimbabwe. He's going to end up like ruling Zimbabwe for a while. Rhodesia, named after him, Rhodesia, right? Rhodesia gets renamed Zimbabwe. Okay. After the Union of South Africa, the Cape politicians led by Merriman, by John Merriman here, the Cape politicians are going to try to spread the Cape franchise to the other 3 states. They want to get as many Black people to vote. Merriman is like an activist he's trying to bring about African rights and African equality. And so he's going to try to do that. He's going to try to spread it to the other states, and he's going to get shot down badly. The other states are going to resist this completely. We have a good example here. This organization here, the Cape Opposition Delegation. This is going to be a delegate of politicians, Cape politicians, and they travel to London and they try to appeal to London to get London to overturn this and to bring about Black voting for all of South Africa. They will fail. These guys will fail. You'll see it's a biracial, or it's a multiracial group, right? Rubusana, Jabavu, they're both Xhosa. Abdullah Abdurrahman, right? That's not an African name, right? That's an Arabic name. Abdullah Abdurrahman is actually, he's a Muslim from Malaysia, from the Malaysian area over there, right? And he lives down in Cape. These guys are going to fail because after the South Africa Act of 1909, London basically is going to say, hey man, domestic policy is South Africa's policy. They can do what they want to do. And they're going to get outvoted by Orange and Transvaal, right? Orange and Transvaal are going to outvote them. Natal is kind of split on the vote. Cape is voting in favor of Black enfranchisement, Black voting, right? Orange and Transvaal are strongly against it, and then Natal is kind of split, right? So it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Within just a couple of years, within about 10 years of South Africa being, not even 10 years, within like 7 or 8 years, all Blacks in the Cape are going to lose their vote. They're all going to lose their vote, including, these guys who were, part of the government. They're going to lose their vote. Abdullah Abdurrahman is some of these guys are going to stick around. We're going to see these guys for a little bit, right? Abdurrahman is going to focus his work on like education. He's going to go and he founds like an education organization and starts opening up colored schools, along the coastline in like Natal and in Cape, right? I told you before that like the Indians are going to get a bunch of schools, right? Well, Abdurrahman is going to be one of those driving forces in colored schools, the creation of colored schools and stuff. These guys are going to continue to resist this, but the conservative forces in Orange and Transvaal are just too strong. Okay. I think I want to stop there. Because World War I fits nicer with the other lessons that are coming up, right? But World War I's coming up here. Did you guys read the sanitation syndrome reading? Okay, so I labeled it for Thursday. So I want you to read this thing. It's like 20 pages. I know it's a little bit long, but this is like the sleeper hit of last year. This turned out to be perhaps my favorite article of the year last year, and my students liked it and they referenced it all the time. Last year. Okay. I want us to do some sanitation syndrome conversation on Thursday. I want us to take about 15 or 20 minutes about that, making sure you understand it, but you guys have to have it read before we can have the conversation. Okay? And I also have a quiz on Thursday on sanitation syndrome. Okay, so we'll do the discussion and then we'll do the quiz. I'll give you the code for the quiz after class is over on Thursday. But this is your warning now. Do the reading because we're gonna have the discussion and the quiz on it. Okay. All right. Sanitation syndrome is it's about disease outbreaks in South Africa at the end of the war, at the end of the Second Boer War, and how they use these disease outbreaks to increase segregation and increase like racial segregation. They use the disease basically as an excuse to enforce segregation laws. It also links really nicely to the discussion reading this week. The discussion reading this week is about women, the role of women in small towns in South Africa, and how women, the influence that women have on enforcing like political and social policies and social norms and stuff. As we're moving through South African history, I think you guys are going to find oftentimes that it's a pretty patriarchal place. It's a pretty sexist place. There's not a lot of women at the top. There's not a lot of big named women, right, who are like super influential. And I'll give you some. I'm not saying there's zero, but there's just not as many. Not as many as the United States. We had quite a few women in the United States movement. What you'll find is that there's a lot fewer big name famous women. And so instead, what you have to do is you have to focus on like the mass of like unnamed women who are like pushing the cultural movement forward, right? And the women are oftentimes the ones pushing that cultural movement forward, right? And they're doing it both in our discussion about spreading segregation and in the sanitation syndrome, right? So this is one of those things that it's a pretty important concept, and it's a concept that's going to return over and over and over again. I think it makes at least 2 appearances in the test, and it also returns in India as well, right? It's a principle that applies to India as well. So it's going to return in the India chapter as well. Okay, so it's not going away. It's a big deal. Do we have any questions or comments or problems or anything? Any y'all?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
What do you? I understand if you don't like have the full answer, but I'm just curious what you as a teacher think will happen soon with
the election?
Corona. No, with Corona, because
COVID.
I've just like heard things. I'm just wondering if you like what you think.
So I'll tell you now, I don't have any special knowledge. Like I don't have anything that they told me that they haven't told you, right? So I have no special knowledge about that. I suspect that high schools are going to get shut down. I think that high schools and middle schools are going to get shut down pretty soon, but I don't have proof of that. I don't have knowledge of that. It seems like that's the way it's going, right? I think so. But I don't have a solid answer for that. So sorry. I mean, if you're online, it's not really going to affect you, I think. But yeah. If we do get completely shut down, I know that the teachers unions are asking the governor to shut down the high schools. They're shut down all the secondary schools, keep the elementaries open and shut down the secondaries. And they're asking for the secondaries to get shut down like next week and keep them shut down all the way till winter break to try to help get things under control. I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know. I kind of think they're going to shut things down pretty soon now. Our hospitals are full, so be careful, you guys. Okay, I will give you a heads up. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. We're not part of the lesson now.